Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The SPA in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is intentional living. Amazing people like you share ways to live by design and with purpose to ensure that this short ride of life occurs with choice, physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-giving knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and creating a positive impact through intentional living. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Amrit Sandhu, an international speaker, podcast host, and founder of Inspired Evolution. Certified by Eckhart Tolle's School of Awakening, he is also MindValley's Master Certified Trainer for Australia and India. Amrit delivers keynotes, talks, seminars, workshops for the Inspired Evolution and MindValley in the United States, Europe, Asia, and Australia. His gift for sharing impactful ideas and insights with unrivaled enthusiasm enables him to engage audiences from all over the world, featuring a wide range of demographics from corporate environments, construction sites, teenage programs, festivals, retreats, and the general public. Amrit, welcome to the show.
Oh, Diane, it is such a pleasure to be here. I love your show and what you're about, so thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor.
My pleasure as well. I'd love to jump into career misalignment. How did it happen?
I laugh now. I wasn't laughing then. How did it happen? I guess, well, long story short, I guess it's, growing up, especially from an immigrant family here in Australia, my heritage is Indian. I pretty much had, and you've probably heard other people put it this way before as well. It's, I had the option of either being a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or a failure. It was pretty much, that was the limitations on my options. And I definitely didn't want to live up to be a failure. So at high school, I was very good at maths and physics. And just sort of physics was a language that really spoke to me. And it just sort of always worked out that I was going to be an engineer. Actually, my passions at the time were helping people. And it's interesting how, our purpose is always actually emerging and speaking through us. So I always kind of was attracted to, potentially becoming a doctor. But I was just so good, touch wood, at maths and physics over biology that it was actually just like, I should pursue this if these are my strengths. And so I sort of tried to meld the two in biomedical engineering when it started off. Intelligent prosthetics was something that really intrigued me. But I remember when I went to work experience that everyone was very heads down, bums up, staring at a computer screen. And that definitely wasn't I couldn't see myself in the people that I was meant to model. So then I sort of left that to sort of pursue mechatronics still, just because it was the engineering aspect of biomedical engineering. It was a robotics. And then from there, mechanical engineering made plenty of sense to me, but electrical engineering really didn't. And so from there, I started pursuing structural engineering because it was just the easy one. If I had to pick anything that was super easy, I was like, I'll just be a structural engineer. And I became that. And just, when I graduated university, touch wood, not to sort of gloat, this is more when they gave me this award, they asked me why I should be awarded the award. And I said, look, I would use it to inspire others. There was a point where I was at university and actually I was kicked out of university because my depression had amounted to lack of motivation, lack of integrity, lack of a whole bunch of stuff. And I was actually kicked out of university the first time around, out of my structural engineering degree. And then the second time I went to university, once I'd actually found meditation, mindfulness, values, and actually started living in alignment, I graduated university top of not just structural engineering, but engineering, and actually top of the university for that cohort. I think in the US they call it Magnum Cum Laude. So that was quite a delta between, where I was and where I got to, and it was just for me a massive sort of ode to the same person, poor mental health, good mental health, what is possible. And so when I graduated, I got, touched with all these offers from incredible institutions to come work for them. And, I had the pick of the litter, touch wood, and I got a really amazing job, and I went along and I was doing it. And 7 years in, I was hoping that, I would be potentially happier with this incredible opportunity that I was in. The whole world was like, you've got such an amazing opportunity, and it just felt, now I look back and I can completely articulate that it was out of alignment with my values. But even if I had done like something as simple as a Myers-Briggs test or, a disc profile back then, it would have been very easy. Like the Myers-Briggs tells me, I'm ENFP, and that I definitely, the things I should be doing is like coaching, teaching, speaking, right? Those sort of people-oriented, care-oriented tasks. And the things that I should absolutely not be doing, the anti sort of Myers-Briggs career options for me are mechanical engineering and structural engineering. And that's exactly what I ended up pursuing. And so how? I think it's based on social paradigms. Society expects us to be a certain way. And, especially when we're young adolescents, we don't really have a real gauge / compass on what we really want to do for ourselves. So we, make the best informed decisions we have on a multiple set of data points. And, our leaders, our elders are who we look up to in that space. But it's an interesting time to be alive, and maybe we can talk more about that, because careers paths are being opened up with, digital technology, the way that it's evolving. The world that we're inhabiting as the next generation, and I now know that looking at my son, the next generation, with the emergence of artificial intelligence, like what I know to be a stable career is not going to be anything like what he's going to know to be a stable career. And I can't fault my parents or people that recommended me the career paths that I was offered. It's just what they knew to be best. But then ultimately, they've worked really hard to give us opportunities as the next generation, but they don't actually get to interface with those opportunities. They can just do the best they can from their vantage point. So yeah, I think societal structure is kind of what led me to misalignment of career. People touting what was the best opportunity for me, but ultimately Amrit was made for something very different. Touch wood.
Yeah, I had something very similar. My parents were like the same thing, doctor or attorney. And I started studying, got my degree in criminal justice and law, and that's how I got into the police department. And I think that when we get into these kind of things, we have good impact, because no matter where we go, there we are, right? We're there to make our impact. And I think when we look at the through line in the back and we see what we've learned along the way, we can bring that all with us. So when people talk about like living their purpose, and they look at like, let's say they realize they are in a misalignment state, how do people actually live their purpose?
Yeah, I love that. So I had a bit of an existential crisis at some point, right? Because I'm the purpose coach. And then I had this realization that actually, even when you're off purpose and you really start to question purpose, you're exactly on purpose at that point too. It's a bit slippery, but if you're keeping up with me, but it's like, that was the exact amount of friction you were meant to feel that was encouraging you to recalibrate back to purpose, right? So are you ever off purpose? It's a really, I guess it's more of a philosophical question, almost like a koan. But ultimately in there are some things that you can definitely work with to highlight whether you are in alignment or not. Now, you can call it to purpose, to the reason you were put here, to the meaning of life. I really love the word alignment at the moment. It means, it seems to speak across multiple dimensions to multiple different types of people. So to discern whether you're in alignment to your purpose or not, the key thing to begin with, in my humble opinion, is your values, right? So for me, my highest values are connection, contribution, and celebration. And so when you feel into Amrit, my name is, what most people identify with. My brand for what I'm up to in the world is Inspired Evolution. And the very next thing that, hopefully people can sort of go, oh yeah, this is what Amrit's about. It's whether you know it consciously or not, it's connection, contribution, and celebration. Now, when we have a look at, what I was up to in my past life, was like corporate construction and building high-rise towers, there's a whole, was I connecting? Not really. There wasn't a lot of connection in that. Even the people that I was working with weren't my tribe, weren't my kind of people, touch wood. And it's not saying that they were the wrong kind of people, like
Right.
they just weren't Amrit's people, you know? And so then there's contribution. Was there somewhat of a contribution? Yes. Some of the apartment towers that I was building were apartments, some of them were commercial spaces, but the apartment towers sort of felt like I was building home for immigrant families. You know, I could relate. My parents migrated here from India, so to Australia. So, you know, there was some sort of contribution, but it wasn't really the contribution I wanted to have in life, but there was something in there. And celebration, there was very little of it. You know, there was just, oh yeah, build this, move on to the next thing, build this, build, move on to the next thing. In fact, it felt like not the best celebration of life, just because there's a bit of a hippie in my heart as well. And, you know, ripping out resources from the earth and sticking them into the urban environment, really questioning, you know, what was the point of all of this? Especially when some of the apartments are just purely investment for offshore investors and they just sort of sit there empty. That's when I really started losing a lot of, becoming really disillusioned about my job, when I started to realize just what the real purpose of what I was up to was, in terms of people just investing money, waiting for it to grow, and I'm working day and night, a lot of stress, putting other people under stress to try and deliver outcomes. To what end? And it all became very hollow, is probably the right word.
Yeah.
And that gave birth to the Inspired Evolution podcast, because I was inspired to evolve. I saw people like yourself, Diane. I saw people, you know, that were living life on their own terms, you know, coaches, speakers, entrepreneurs, leaders, creatives, and they were able to live life on their own terms. And I was like, surely I could do something similar. But I just didn't know how. I had no formal education. So I was hoping to interview everybody on the Inspired Evolution podcast every week for the last 6 years. Now it's 2 a week. And we, you know, release these episodes with everybody. And I was hoping that I could learn from them how they lived their creative life, their truth, their fullest expression. I know living your truth is a massive thing for you, that you continuously bring us home to, Diane. So yeah, that was kind of my journey as well. How do I live my truth? And so on the journey of interviewing all these people, it started to come to the point where I started to realize, oh, okay, I really enjoy, and I got clear on my values, which was connection, contribution, celebration. This is why this wasn't working and it felt so soul-sucking. And the podcast is just thriving, touchwood, because I'm connecting with people all the time. I'm connecting with you here today. Contribution, hopefully sharing my story and my insights a little bit with others, you know, is of service to them. And celebration, hopefully we can all live life a little bit richer, a little bit fuller, thanks to the shared connection and the contributions that are afforded in this space, you know. So yeah, as a vehicle, I think podcasting and then coaching and then speaking all afford great connection, contribution, and celebration for me. And I'm conscious that because I've worked with it to such a degree, it sounds really like everybody needs to become a podcaster or a speaker. And that's not the case, right?
Right.
You need to get clear on what your values are and what vehicles enable your values to show up the most fully, if I can say it that way. It's probably grammatically incorrect.
It's perfect.
But, you know, that would be the richest version of you. And yeah, if for those that are tuning in that want to find out their values, it's really easy. 20-minute exercise, inspiredevolution.com/values. 20 minutes from now, you can be as clear as I am on what your 3 pillars are.
So great. You know, once you know what those values are and you then weigh everything that you do, the people you spend time with, even where you live, you know, then it's like that fuels you more, right? Because you're on your path and you're able to look at it. And I think more than ever, particularly the last, you know, let's say 3 years, especially during the shutdown times, people were isolated, right? They didn't have that connection. So they really got to see, you know, they were in those depressed states. They were not in their best health. There were a lot of things that were going on that had people, you know, realize that they were misaligned in their life and they wanted to get back on track. And so, you know, it really affected people's mental health. So what have you discovered as far as how mental health comes into play when people are discovering their purpose and living their purpose?
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually it's the heart of my work. Thank you so much. I have come to find, and maybe it's just me, but actually I know, having coached now over 260 people one-on-one intimately, that I'm not alone on this dance, that the cornerstone for your health, good mental health, is actually having a deep sense of meaning. So purpose is health, and health is purpose, is the deep message in my heart. Yeah, and I've been carrying that for quite some time, and I thought I was a bit, you know, that was my message, and you know, here we are to share it with the world. But really, it's the more I started to lean into researching it, learning more and more about it, even the deep science of Ayurveda, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of year old, which is what gave birth to, well, not gave birth to, but yoga lives within that set of scientific discoveries, right? The whole purpose of Ayurveda, which is health and wellness, at its heart is to drive your dharma. There's a reason you're here. So let's afford you the greatest amount of health and vitality for you to execute upon the reason that you're here. Now, if you're not able to execute upon the reason that you're here, something's compromised in your health. So you can have a look at your health and kind of go, why am I being set back? And alternatively, if you're finding that you're actually driving really well, it's probably because you're your health is set up quite well as well. So you can diagnose it from both points. It's like, am I striving towards my outcomes effectively? Okay, cool. That's a really good place to start. Or am I being hampered by my health, and why am I not able to execute upon the reason I was here? So if you find yourself like fatigued, lethargic, demotivated, and massive asterisks here. Like for me, I know that the opposite of expression for me was depression, right? Express your life fully. Is if you're unable to do that, there is some level of depression that's happening. You're depressing in. Now, the asterisk being that some people do need, support with SSRIs, and, if you do need to go see a doctor, absolutely. But oftentimes I have found, in my case as well, was not having a sense of meaning was actually very depressing. Right. And when I didn't have that direction, that sense of meaning, that sense of fulfillment, that sense of, hey, what I'm doing is in alignment to the reason I was put here. I'm living into my values. I've got a vision that's aligned to my values. I found myself very demotivated, very lazy, difficult to get out of bed, toxic to be around for other people. I was angry, I was bitter, I was frustrated. And it's the same Amrit, that's the irony. It's like, it's exactly the same Amrit that you're speaking to today. And touch, would you tune into me now? And it's like, oh, Amrit's upbeat, Amrit's zinging, Amrit's enthusiastic. And it's like, yeah, that's because I'm in a podcasting conversation about finding your purpose and the place that it has for you to live a fuller, richer, more healthy life from a mental health standpoint. Of course I'm going to be zinging. This is what I was put here to do.
Right. Well, and our words are so revealing, like even just the word depression, right? You are depressing, right? You're pressing down emotion. You're not living your true self. You're out of alignment. And so when these words come up, people think, okay, depression, let's medicate this, right? Well, what's the exploration that you can do, right? How do you bring that vitality back up in your life? How do you get into that alignment so that, you bring yourself up and I love the whole thing about motion, right? Emotion is in motion. So when we move, we can move things through us, and it really helps us to just see what that purpose is in our life. And so, a lot of times you can have, okay, here's like depressed Amrit, right? And then you got zingy Amrit, right? And there's all these different spectrums that we are on life. How does fear come into play?
Fear. How does fear come into play? Well, fear is a really interesting it's a really interesting device, I would say, that is, part of it is a huge part of it is a survival mechanism for us. But now the world that we live in, I find a lot of our fears are, I don't want to say unbased, but they're programmed in and we're living with them. And yet they're not really justified,
100%. Like if someone says, you're fearful, okay.
It's, because one of my biggest fears, I remember there was a point where a lot of my transformation culminated into, this particular moment in time where I was sitting there and I just happened to Google the word courage. And I remember when I Googled the word courage, I had a bit of an epiphany, because up until that point, I thought courage and fearlessness were the exact same thing. And when I was reading the definition of courage, it was like, courage is not having fear, which is what fearlessness is. Courage is absolutely having fear and taking action towards it anyway.
Right.
And I always kind of, and maybe it was like toxic masculinity or whatever, as a male, I just kind of wanted to I was like, oh, I'm courageous. Like, I wanted to live a courageous life. Like, I want to be identified as courageous, brave, strong. And in that moment, I was like, oh, courage is not something you're born with, which is what maybe I watched too many Braveheart movies and I literally thought courage and fearlessness were synonymous. Courage is a skill,
Yes.
right? So, and a fear is a prerequisite for courage. So you ask me, like, what is the role of courage? So, there's that stoic, very common moniker now, thanks to Ryan Holiday in his book, that, the obstacle is the way. And the obstacle being fear, So for me, my biggest fear, as soon as I tuned in, the next realization I had in that moment of epiphany of reading, hey, courage, fearlessness, not the same thing. Courage, you need fear as a prerequisite, was like, what is my biggest fear? And it was this realization that my life is based on what everyone had prescribed for me, right? This sort of white picket fence lane, I like to call it in my head, which is, get really good grades, study really hard, go to university, get a really good job, then buy a nice house, start a family, have a couple of kids, work really hard, work your way up the corporate ladder. And then eventually, once you're 65 and you're not able to, travel with as much gusto as you probably wanted to, or, then you can finally retire and then you can spend the next 20 years of your life to live. And just the trade-off of that, just 45 years for 20, to spend 45 years working really hard so you can live 20 years of your life on the other end of it. I don't know. There was already issues that I had with that, but that was my biggest fear, that, I was going to live. There's this lane that society prescribes, and the fear was actually what's going on out here? What's going on beyond that lane? Like, how do you live outside of that lane? Or do we all just free fall into an abyss? How do we support our families? How do we, those creatives, entrepreneurs, speakers, people that I was telling you about before that were inspiring for me, Inspired Evolution, how were they sustaining themselves and how is life built outside there? And so fear was a very potent revealer, I would say, of what my path really was. And, probably worth at this juncture sort of mentioning again another asterisk, which is there's definitely fears. Like, if there's a massive spider that falls on your head and you live in Australia and it's toxic and it's poisonous, okay, that's a fear that causes fight or flight. Absolutely, you should run. But if there's some fears that, you can sort of see when you unpack them that they're a bit unbased, it's worth exploring those fears. Because the interesting thing you'll find as I started podcasting and started moving into this space of, okay, maybe I'll just see what it's like to live life outside of this swim lane that is prescribed to me by society. Actually, your fear starts to shrink and your courage, is rewarded with this incredible sense of empowerment. And, that whole conversation around fortune favors the bold. It takes a little bit of courage and your fear dissolves. A little bit more courage and your fear dissolves. And a little bit more courage and your fear starts to dissolve, to the point where you look back after a while and you go, I was afraid of this. And it's a bit ridiculous, right? But I totally acknowledge that it's very easy for me to say that now, having podcasted, coached, and spoken for like 6 years now. But I remember how palpable it was. Like, there was this massive wall that was like, who am I? My self-worth, everything was in the way. But yeah, fear can be an amazing mechanism if you're willing to question it and work with it to find your path.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I can remember working like graveyards and be like in alleys by myself at like 2 a.m. And it was just like anything could pop out at any time. And so I love just like if fear was just like the letters and you look at it as an acronym, and there's so many different ways, people can look at fear. And a lot of times will be like, okay, that whole false evidence appearing real, right? But the other aspect too is face everything and rise. So the more you step towards, as you were speaking walking into the fear, it does start dissipating, because now you've got, everything in your peripheral, you see what's going on, and you're actually making really good conscious decisions when you have all of it. A lot of times when people get into the place of fear, they don't even know what they're fearing, right? It's like almost like that gang mentality of like, oh, my neighbors are fearful, I should be fearful, right? And so when you actually look at something at all the different angles of it and go, can this hurt me? What are all the, the details I need to know about it? How do I want to live my life? And that was like you looking at that misalignment about what was not working for you. okay, what's possible, right? When you get to that place of curiosity and you're able to look at things from a different perspective, it allows you to, step into living your best life that you've done, which is amazing.
Touch wood.
So good. So speaking of creating your life, one of the things I always like to ask my guests is that we live life differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our living room. What is your favorite room in your home and why?
Oh, what is my favorite room in my home? Oh, that's there's such a kinship to all the different rooms. I have a very massive affinity for this particular room just because there's so much like this space is set up as a podcast studio, and it's just incredible just the conversations that I get to have and people like yourself, Diane, that I get to meet, and your audience. It's there's something special about this space, touch wood, in my heart at the very least, just what it affords me. And even just what that symbolizes for me is like, this is meant to be an office. So it's meant to be work, but actually it's kind of like my favorite little space. It's like my little man cave.
I love all the lights.
Yeah, come down here, turn the lights on. It's got kind of this vibe going on, and it's like, let's go. So it's even cool, touch wood, for me. And, I say this not from a place of gloating again, but just to, inspire, which is, like just the fact that work could be play. Work can feel like play. I think that is such a rewriting of the old paradigm program story that society has sort of written for us. And I think it is possible, touch wood. So I have a real amazing kinship with this room, but I also, upstairs living room, like there's also this really, now that I've got a son, especially, there's a lot of natural lighting. We live kind of on a trail, we live on a trail, so you can see out into nature, and just watching him sort of growing in and around all this nature. Those will definitely be some of the sweetest memories, touch wood. Yeah.
So good. You've talked about true freedom as being service. Speak into that.
Wow. It came to me in a meditation, right? So I was sitting there, eyes closed, and not every meditation is this illustrious as well, by the way. I'm conscious, so again, full of asterisks today. But this particular meditation was quite rewarding, touch wood. I was sitting there and I could see this amazing machine, like cogs, pistons, but like pistons made of gold. This is an engineer's mind, by the way. So, sapphire, rubies, like all these little parts, and, it was just incredible. And it was the machinery of reality as we were looking at it. It was just being symbolized in this really gorgeous vision for me. And all the pistons and everything and cogs were spinning, and everything was just completely well-oiled, perfect, right? And I could see these little blue spheres, and they were just rolling around, and I was just like, what is going on? Like, what are these little blue spheres? And they just caught, because everything was locked into place and moving in perfect harmony, but these spheres were like swimming around, doing their own thing, completely autonomous. And once intuitively, I spoke to one. I don't know how that works, but anyway, I was speaking to one of them. I was like, hey, like, what is your energy about? Like, how come you're not part of the machine? You're actually free of the tapestry of all of this. And they're like, oh yeah, that's simple. We're free. Oompa Loompa energy, by the way, these little blue spheres. We're free because we're in service to the machine. And I was like, that's very interesting. And so they would go in, and one would be like soak into the machine and become lubricant. One would go in and, polish off another part. And I could just see them, that because they were in service to what was going on, they weren't actually localized to, they weren't bound locally. They were able to be free and move around and do what they needed to do. So for me, it's a really deep philosophical pondering around the conversation around destiny, freedom, and what we really have. One of the things that I've just come to know as my truth is you're gonna do something in life, right? And you can go back, there's so many different stories as to why this is the way, but some people believe that the reason, because they took the first bite of the apple, Adam and Eve, now there's, God said you will now work for your labor. Like, it's so many stories like this in so many different cultures. So you're going to do work, right? and you're going to have to earn your keep, right? For so many of us, that's the way. Now, touch wood, the way I want to be of service is have conscious conversations with people, illuminate, potentially drive insight, inspire ideas, connect people to ideas, people to people, ideas to ideas. And that just feels like something I would love to do. And people get value out of that, touch wood, from Amrit, I hope. And they say they do. So that's what's going on, right? And so that is my service that I would love to show up the most for and as. And so as I'm serving more and more of that, actually, back to what we said before, work doesn't feel like work. Work actually feels like play. And that essence of play and adventure is the closest I believe will come to true freedom. Yeah. So therein lies the service is freedom. It's very counterintuitive because service kind of feels like hospitality, shackles, chains, like you're now subservient to, you're the butler of, and it's like you're the servant. Like that is the last thing that is furthest away from freedom. But that's very right brain. Yeah. But in the left brain, things are, the polarities, like trust and surrender are two sides to the same coin. I believe service and freedom, two sides to the same coin, right? You're most free when you're in service to exactly what you were put here to do.
Yeah. I love how that just all starts kind of like clicking into place. This whole thing about, like you said, if you went to the old paradigm where you're, working a certain amount of years for, 20 years of enjoyment to turn down a right turn on a happiness way, right? If you are in service and you're making impact in the world and you're doing the things that bring you joy and you're in that alignment of who you are, then that service comes from joy, right? And so it's like people who love to cook, right? It's like they can't wait for you to take that bite and to appreciate that because that's part of their service and that brings them joy. It's that part of like receiving a gift. It's like when you give a gift, it's like that there's like this transactional, it's like this is where we get to, comes back to, you're talking about, connection, right? And that's where even in the world of AI and all the things that are happening out in the world, when you at the end of the day, people aren't going to be on their deathbed and go, boy, I'm sure glad I used that AI on my messaging. It's like, who are you surrounded with? Who are you connected with? Who are you in service to? Right? Because we are here to be social creatures and to have that greater connection. And I think what you are bringing to the world to be able to realize what it is that they are here to do and to be in that alignment is of the highest and greatest service. You as that blue light.
Touch wood, totally agree. Yeah.
So good. Well, I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they best do that, Amrit?
Oh, wow. It'd be such a blessing if you guys stay connected. That would be incredible. So, if you guys are keen to check out a little bit around what's going on in my world, youtube.com/Inspired Evolution. The YouTube channel for the Inspired Evolution is what I now call the home of the Inspired Evolution podcast. We do 2 podcasts every week. There's some coaching insights that I release videos on when I have, a topic of conversation that came up that was quite profound in coaching. I'll pull back after the coaching and record the insight and sort of share that on. It's a habit I'm getting into now, and those videos have also been very supportive for people. There's lots of meditations there as well that I've created for clients. So, yeah, the Inspired Evolution YouTube channel is the home. And yeah, if you want to find out more about, Inspired Evolution speaking and stuff, that's inspiredevolution.com. If you want to find out more about coaching, we've set up a coaching website, amrit.coach. But I think, come on over to YouTube, subscribe, get a taste of the ecosystem, see the sort of conversations we're having. And then, if you want to take the journey further from there, it'll be super easy for you to find your way.
Perfect. I love that. And as you know, our theme for this season is intentional living. And so in what way are you living an intentional life today?
Wow. So intentional living at the moment, there is so much that I've dedicated to. So when I think about intentional living, I think about the intentions that I set and contemplate for a certain period of time. So the intention for this particular year was actually health and wellness. And this particular moon cycle that I'm in, the intention is gentleness. So every 28 days, when the full moon appears, I'll hand the old intention back and take in a new intention, give thanks. And it's just a beautiful way, because I live urban, very in the city. And so finding that, just reminding myself that I can set an intention with the moon and it has its own cycles. It connects me back to nature. By design, intentional living, right? And so having those intentions and then impregnating that 28 days with an intention and watching what comes up. And full transparency, sometimes the like I'll set an intention of gentleness and all I'll see is all my harshness. So it's not for the faint of heart. Even though it sounds really wispy waspy, it's like, intentional living, setting intentions with moon cycles, like how beautiful. And then, sometimes it'll be like, abundance. And then all you see is like lack. And you're like, crap, why did I set that intention? But then touch wood, there are other times when you've got to break down and break through, and then you break through and you see, actually that was teaching me where all my edges are, and that's where I can actually soften and work. So that's a little bit around how intentional living shows up in my life at the moment. Yeah.
So good. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being with us here and just sharing your wisdom and just your beautiful energy.
Oh, Diane, touch wood. I am such a fan of your work. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure and an honor again. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And to our listeners out there, are you misaligned? Like, what's going on in your life? Like, it might be time to just touch in and see, like, are you on the path that you want to keep going on? Do you maybe want to make a shift and make a change in what you're doing? Please feel free to reach out to either myself or Amrit. We're happy to answer any questions, help you get on track and, share this. It's a really kind of crazy times going on. People are just off track in a lot of different ways. And, if they can have people help get them back on track, have them, really get clear on what their values are and why they're actually here and be in that alignment and live that intentional life, then we're all doing each other that service and we're really being in that true freedom. So until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.